So this past week's Fun Fact Friday, we talked about how the United States horse population has decreased by about a third since 2007. And we had a lot of questions as to why that was taking place. This is a subject that I have studied pretty extensively, and I have a lot of thoughts. I'll also say this will be kind of a controversial video because I know some of these topics are going to be quite emotional to some people. So I would just ask that you hear what I have to say and you take it in with your brain as well as your heart. It's very easy to have feelings on some of these subjects, but sometimes the answers are counterintuitive, and what we might want might not really be what's best. And so the number one thing that has prompted the loss of a third of the horses in the United States of America, and I'll say here, I'm not talking about Mustangs here. I do also have a lot of things to say about Mustangs, and we'll discuss that in a later video, but for this video we're talking about typical domesticated horses that we trail ride and show and rodeo on and so forth, not Mustangs. In 2007, Louisiana State Senator Mary Landrieu attached to one of the funding bills for the government. Like you have those times where we hit our debt ceiling and we have to fund the government and it's going to shut down. At that point in time we were still involved in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and so this was troop funding as well, and so it was one of those bills that had to be passed, but it's going to be 6,000 pages and all sorts of things get added into it that really have nothing to do with what it's supposed to be about. Well, her portion of what it isn't supposed to be about but got stuck in there was the defunding of USDA inspectors, which were required to be in the processing plants for horses in the United States. That's important in several ways. One, it was by law required that USDA inspectors were in those processing plants. They're there to make sure that things function humanely and go about in the manner that they're supposed to. It's their job. Also, they have to be there by law, so by defunding them, now those plants can no longer function. It was a de facto banning of them kind of through a back channel mechanism. And it is important when we view other legislative matters that are current that we recognize that this mechanism of using USDA inspectors to be required and then defunding those inspectors, de facto killing that event, is already in the playbook, has already been used, and has already worked. So let's talk about slaughter. I know this is going to be kind of career suicide to a degree, but part of my brand is talking about the hardcore truth and about doing it in a cerebral way and kind of bypassing the emotional bullshit that people want to tie to things. There's no topic within the horse industry that applies to more than slaughter. So I'm going to tell you right now that I don't know a single fellow horse professional, I'm talking about trainers, veterinarians, breeders, people that are decades in the business and have been doing this and dedicated their life to this. I don't know a single one, not one, that wouldn't agree with me that banning slaughter in 2007 was the single worst thing that happened to horses in general in our lifetimes, in the United States at least. And this is why. A few numbers. At that point, there were 10.4 million, 10.5 million horses in the United States. On average, up to that point, about 100,000 horses went through that process and were sold to the killer. There are requirements for those horses. So, for instance, they have to be sound enough to reasonably make the journey. They can't be completely blind. If they're obviously sick, things like that, then there are In all of the sale barns, there's livestock brand commission officers that are there to oversee things like that. It has been illegal to sell Mustangs for slaughter for a long time. I'm not going to say that it doesn't ever happen. I don't think it happens nearly as commonly as some people would claim. The big reason is that the slaughter market, which again, if we look at the numbers, that's less than 1% of horses, even at the peak. Less than 1% of horses go in that route. That set the economic floor for the entire horse market. So a horse that didn't have papers, didn't have value in being bred, didn't have value in being ridden, maybe wasn't sound anymore, whatever. It really had no other purpose economically that it had value left in. We're now at the end of the line. We can do nothing with this particular animal. It still has economic value for meat, dog food, glue, whatever. That's an ugly thing to say, I understand, but keep in mind, this was the floor of the horse market. At that point, when it was running what we might call normally, before the 2007 ban, horses were probably a minimum of about 60 cents a pound, and at times they might be 80, 100 cents a pound. So that animal that's the bottom 1% of the horse world still has an economic value any day of the week of $600 to $1,000. Now, if that horse does ride a little bit, does have papers, does have breeding value, anything up and up and up, right? Its economic value is definitely more than $600 to $1,000. It was routine at that point that we would have customers that would bring in colts. They were just, we would call old Mexico by truck and trailer kind of papers, nothing special, just very average sort of horses. We'd put 30, 60 days on them, ride them through a sale. That horse, I could guarantee you $2,500 up to about $3,500. The breeder would make money. They could afford to pay me. I would make money, and then somebody would get themselves a nice horse that had been well cared for because it had real economic value. That same sort of horse right now you could get for less than $1,000 all day long. I routinely, for the last 15 years, hardly a week goes by that someone doesn't offer me a horse for free. Those low-end horses literally have no economic value right now. And by the way, horse slaughter never ended. Okay? What happened is that we stopped slaughtering them in the U.S. They still were getting shipped to Canada, and they're still today being shipped to Mexico. Now, do you think that the standards in those processing facilities in Mexico is as high as it was here in the United States with USDA inspectors overseeing the process? Of course not. And I'll tell you, I know that there are some videos out there that are made to tug at your heartstrings and stuff. That's the way the animal rights activists work. They will sit there and film every single solitary second of a place for 8 months to come up with 5 minutes of video where some employee was having a terrible day and did regrettable things. I don't think that is the norm. I don't think most of those people would put up with that if they walked around and they keep catching Jim abusing horses, beating the hell out of them with a prod or something like that. Jim's gone. Nobody wants to deal with that kind of stuff. But the animal rights people will catch just enough of Jim and then make it look like it's the norm, and they'll edit those videos. They change the lighting and stuff. When I was in college, we were shown a film that was done by some grad students in agricultural sciences, and they took a dairy cow interaction and they filmed it. And what it was a Holstein cow that was down because of something called grass tetany. It's basically a calcium deficiency. And they can die from that. And you have to get them up. When they go down, you know, the clock is ticking. And cows can survive down there, I've seen weeks, horses don't handle it very well. So they've got a skid steer and they've got a hot shot, and they're trying to get this cow up, and they're getting calcium in it, and they're doing all that. And so they show you the video of this process. It's 10 or 15 minutes long. And then they take it and they edit it like the animal rights people do, and they make the lighting dark, and they just show you a 3-second clip of bzzz, and another 3-second clip of a big bang of the skid steer and all, and they take it completely out of context. They don't let you know what's going on. These people are working hard to save this animal's life, and they make it look like hell on earth for 30 seconds. And then you put some Sarah McLachlan music with it, and it just becomes a tear-jerking, terrible thing. That's absolutely what's going on. And every one of these legislative acts that are going through, they are written exclusively by the lobbyists for these animal rights entities. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that there is a significant difference between animal rights and animal welfare. I am pro animal welfare. What the animal rights community does, I think, is disgusting, and they are as disingenuous and absolutely any means justify the ends. They lie all the time. I've gone to the Humane Society of the United States' page on horse slaughter. Literally every sentence on that page is debunkable. It is just lie after lie after lie after lie of why horse slaughter is a terrible thing. Again, this is not an issue that many people would be candid about, particularly in public like I'm doing right now. You would be very hard pressed to find a horse trainer or a veterinarian who would disagree with what I'm saying, though. So right now, horse slaughter is still taking place, or what I would call processing. It's simply taking place in Mexico. The numbers have gone way down. Now, instead of 100,000 a year, we're only shipping about 30,000. This has also spawned, particularly with the public part of it, the perception that is being driven by the animal rights people. Now we have got two entirely new industries that didn't really exist prior to 2007. That's the kill pens. So these are the same people that are shipping the 30,000 to slaughter, but they're going to find any horse that comes through that looks like they can squeeze some economic value out of it still. And now we've got bail situations. So this horse that they paid $117 for at the sale, now they've got an $1,800 bail on it, and people are sending me GoFundMe links of save this horse and yada yada. And I mean, they are putting the screws to people with this soft-hearted deal. The second industry that has developed as a result of the slaughter ban are all of the rescues. And I'm going to say here, legitimate rescues. I'll also say there are plenty of rescues that aren't so legitimate. I am a board member of the Louisiana Equine Council. We don't have any legal authority to do anything about this, but we get emails all the time on horses needing to be rescued from the rescuer. So I'm going to say here, I mentioned like the Humane Society of the United States. PETA's in that group as well as others. Your local Humane Society of Lafayette, Louisiana, or Animal Aid Shelter or whatever. Now that's much more likely to be a legitimate and good organization. The national branches, specifically like the Humane Society of the United States, that is nothing but a lobbying effort. They take in hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and they are very big on, putting the screws to senators and all, affecting change, lobbying. They are not actually using any of those funds to get down on the ground in the trenches and help and feed animals. In fact, when Hurricane Katrina happened here in Louisiana, they raised, I forgot how many tens of millions of dollars by playing their commercials, and they send video teams down, and I'm legitimately part of helping rescue those horses. They're filming it. They're not helping at all. Then they go make a commercial they put it on the news, they get your sympathy, and they get money. The Louisiana legislature had to pass a law to get them to actually spend 10% of that money in Louisiana actually helping the animals. When you send money to those organizations, you are not helping animals. You are paying for bacon rack shrimp dinners for congressmen and senators and things like that. So the horse slaughter ban takes place. It takes the legs out from underneath the horse market. Here's one of the rules of the world. Anything that economically devalues horses is bad for horses. And this is the king of that playing out in front of our eyes. All of those horses that are on that lower third, they're the ones that really suffer, because that horse that would have been worth $600 to $1,000 for slaughter, so now the next level up they're worth more. Those horses that I could have gotten $2,500 for pre-slaughter ban, they become the new $600 horses. Okay? $300 horses. Like I just said a minute ago, I have horses for free. If you'll just get this thing off of my hands and take it out of my life, and I don't have it as an expense anymore, I'll just give you the horse, because he has no value. I can't sell him. I can't hardly give him away. Those ones now become the neglect cases. They are the reason why the rescues exist. I have personally seen way more horses than I ever wanted to wind up abandoned, totally neglected, and instead of them having a rough 24-hour trip on a trailer and being processed within 24 hours of being bought by a kill buyer, they now spend 3 years slowly starving to death, no hoof care, looking like a skeleton before they finally die, or the sheriff or animal control, it gets bad enough that they intervene. And a lot of times when it's bad enough that they intervene, that animal is then just euthanized. A large percentage of the time, the animal's immediately euthanized. I'd way rather see that horse of low economic value dealt with in 24 hours, even if it's bad. I don't personally think it was bad, like people say often. I think maybe there were some instances, but I don't think as a general rule it was a terrible experience. But even if for every single one of them it was a terrible experience, I would way rather that terrible experience be 24 hours long rather than 3 years. I would way rather that floor of the market be there, where the animals that are rideable, breedable, they have economic value. That economic value is enough that it's worth me calling the vet to come out and tend to this animal. When they're free or $300 or $600, you don't pay $1,000 vet bill on that animal. They become disposable. We started having cases of, we wound up in Louisiana with 1,000 head in our national parks, feral horses. And there are a lot of stories about the origination of those horses, and I'm sure some of those horses have been in there for generations. The majority of them in the last 15 years are animals that people took to the woods and turned loose. I've heard of instances of people going during that period of time. They'd go trail riding, they'd park their truck and trailer, they go out for a few hours, they come back, there's 2 horses tied to their trailer. That now someone else made their problems your problem. I personally have about 10 horses here on the place that were during that period left with me in training. They took their problem and made it my problem. And in Louisiana, I can't get a clear bill of sale or title on those animals once they're just dumped on you. So I can't really sell them. They're now up to me to financially fend for and deal with. This whole slaughter ban thing has, trying to save 1%, we have made it way, way worse for a third of the entire population. So breeders stopped breeding. That's a big part of why the horse population dropped by a third. Horses are naturally dying of old age and so forth, and they're not being replenished by the breeders because we destroyed the economic incentive to breed new horses. Again, the kill pen thing, which is truly disgusting. Y'all, if you get nothing else from this video, please stop buying, rescuing, saving those horses. All you're doing is putting more money in the hands of some of the most despicable people on the planet. And then they go buy even more horses. They're what's keeping that engine running. And you are way overpaying. If you want to go rescue or save a horse, go to the sale yourself and bid on one, and I promise you can buy them for $200 instead of $1,800. That's what they're doing. That's just emotional terrorism, essentially. Please stop supporting those people with your dollars. That's a true waste. If you're gonna go buy a horse from a rescue, which is great, I'm not saying rescues are terrible by any stretch, but find a legitimate one. There are legitimate ones. There are bad ones too. It has become its own industry. Rescues, for the most part, didn't exist. There were maybe 5% of the rescues that exist today before 2007. That just wasn't a word you ever heard. Now I hear it on a daily basis. It's become a dirty word to me, quite frankly, because of all of the stuff that it entails and the just the problems that are inherent with that. Mustangs, I'm going to do a whole other video on Mustangs and some of the facts about them. Someone brought that up, whether it was feral horses like I specified in the beginning of this, or Mustangs. It has been illegal for a long time to sell a Mustang to a kill buyer. I'm not saying it never happens, but it has been illegal for a long time. So the idea that there's just floods of Mustangs going through this process, you know, that's certainly not supposed to be true. And again, at any point in this process, there should be livestock enforcement agents making sure that that's not actually true. So I can't say I've sat at cow sales where they're running horses through before the sale. I've not personally ever seen a Mustang go through. And I mean, they've got, you know, the white Freeze brand tattoos on their necks. So, but I don't live in an area where there's tons of Mustangs either. That's probably enough for this video. We'll talk a little more about legislation and Mustangs in other videos, but I do feel like this is important. The overwhelming number of people are against horse processing, but I think that is mostly because of misinformation and emotional decision making. You know, the veterinarians, the horse trainers, those of us that have dedicated our lives to this, I don't think anyone could reasonably make the claim that we don't love horses, that they're not incredibly important to us. We've all taken financial hardships on because of this process and because of these animals. And when that group of people that is literally more invested and vetted than any other is telling you that this was a bad thing to do and that it really hurt most horses, I think maybe people should be a little more open-minded and listen, because we killed a third of our horses trying to save 1%. That math does not work for me. Alright, that's been Mindful Monday. I hope you learned a little something, and I hope if you're one of those that's heavily against slaughter, I hope this is a little thought-provoking for you, because I know it's counterintuitive, but hands down it's been the worst thing to happen to horses in our lifetimes.